Hello, everybody. I'm looking forward to share our experiences uh, on introducing PPI in multinational and multidisciplinary research. Next slide, please. Mhm. This will go stepwise because it's a process over almost 10, 12 years. And this is the best way to describe and to make visible for you how this changed over the years and brought us to where we are now. So it's a process. It's not a final state of art within PPI. Next slide, please. A few slides to describe the research program where PPI has been applied, as we will tell. It's within the joint programming that is a member state initiative to address grand challenges in EU and globally. And we do that this has been done by coordinating national research program, aligning national research program to avoid overlap and to strengthen the results that we bring. So it's not an EU program, it's co-work between individual states. Next slide, please. Here you see the globe, and you see who are the current members of this joint programming initiative. The yellow are the EU member states. The blue one are the associated countries which take part in the calls, etc. And the red one are the partner countries. And it's important to stress that it's a collaboration between a national agency for each of the one or two agencies in each of the participating countries. So it's those that at the national level are announcing their funding and so on. This is a way to further integrate research over the globe. Next slide, please. And which will show which areas is this about. It's called JP, Joint Programming, ND, Neurodegenerative Diseases. And at the left, you see the diseases, of course, Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease are the dominating, but the others are also part of the program. And because some of the basic challenges, basic biological changes are the same for the diseases. And what we do in the calls, because we are working in calls regularly 1 or 2 per year, and the topic of the call can be a basic scientific question, the medical, which is the prevention, early diagnosis, clinical trials, and finally the social and care for the patients. Next slide, please. Which is the process of PPI, how PPI was introduced. Because as Richard said just before, that when you start up, PPI is not there. And it took about 6-7 years because it was introduced when we started in 2015. Because it was decided this is a steering group, which is the steering group for the whole program, that PPI should be should be introduced slowly, because we knew already that for many of the nations in 2015, PPI was not part of research at all. So we came up with some guidelines because we thought that by putting on guidelines, people would read them and then apply them. It's a top-down approach. I can already now disclose it doesn't work. From 2018, PPI became part of the call text, and in the applications, for the applications, we did a systematic qualitative internal review, and we could rank them in 3 groups: A, B, C. A is the best, B is fine, C is, well, that's lacking details and so on. And then we asked for the researchers to report back after year 1 and year 4 if they followed what they said in the application. I can already now disclose that it's very difficult to get these reporting backs, and there's a good explanation for that. Next slide, please. Yeah, step 3, we found out that we needed some bottom-up approach, which means we need some patient and public influence on the PPI procedures that we had. So we developed, from 23, in fact, we started in 22, we have developed an international PPI network consisting of patients and carers. And these members of this network are now involved in the external evaluation of the proposals, which means that it has changed totally the way we rate the applications. Furthermore, we have, by this way, introduced a shared learning on PPI in research between the members of this network and the JP&D research community, and which means that we learn by doing it. And I think that was my last slide, was it? No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was mine. Over to Alexandra.
So we're going to hand over to Alexandra here. Alexandra, as I mentioned, is a researcher at the Department of Public Health at University of Southern Denmark. And Alexandra, it's over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking this hour to reflect with us on PPI in research. I also thank Richard, Katie, and Oliver from Cochrane for their kind assistance in preparing this webinar. And I thank Måns Herder for the fine introduction from whom I have learned so much on PPI and beyond. Next slide, please. Let's face it, decades of research on neurodegenerative disease have not led to a better understanding, have led, in fact, for a better understanding of the mechanisms of the disease, but not much of it has led to an improvement in the quality of life of people living with these diseases. Therefore, the need to listen to the specific needs of patients and carers for guiding research became urgent. PPI became really urgent on neurodegenerative diseases. But really, how do we do it? We research most of us have never seen a patient. How do we really involve them in research? So at the beginning, it was very common when we first tried to do this to read sentences like researcher groups are expected to involve patients and carers at each stage of the research process. And I have to say that for patients, this sounded very simplistic, very general, and even a little bit tokenistic. I mean, researchers just have an agenda and they need to ticks a box, and it didn't mean much to patients. So it became clear that we needed to move, if we really wanted to do PPI, we had to do it from a very nice thing to have in a proposal to a meaningful must-have PPI as a hallmark of good quality research. Next slide, please. So very soon, it became very clear that PPI really had to be an impactful endeavor. So when we set to do it at JPND, we immediately faced a list of challenges. First, of course, neurodegenerative diseases is a broad range of diseases. It goes from ataxia all the way to dementia and everything in between. So there was a lot of difference among the diseases and the needs of patients with each type of neurodegenerative disease. On the other side, JPND funded research that goes from very basic, very in vitro research, where patients are not at all involved, all the way to health and social care, where patients are involved not only as participants in the study, but also as partners in PPI. And here, PPI is absolutely crucial and has to be done in a very thorough way, because this is where we really need to hear the patients when designing even the study. A third type of challenge we had, and very specific for JPND, was the fact that we had consortia groups that were multinational, multicultural, and multidisciplinary. And of course, these brought challenges on their own, and we'll be addressing them today. And all these groups, regardless of their nation or culture background, had very different experience with PPI among them. So how they were going to collaborate was another challenge. But last and more importantly, we needed to know how was PPI, what was the feedback from implementing PPI. We have to say that at JPND, we have consortia from European countries, of course, but we also have Turkey, Canada, Australia, Israel, the United States, and we're hoping to have many others. So we really needed to take a look at these and at least identify the challenges. Next slide, please. So we and everybody else trying to implement PPI decided that it was time to teach the researchers how to do it by writing guidelines. You know, we had a top-down approach. We're going to give you a group of instructions, you will follow it, and that will be it. It will be fine. PPI will be wonderful. And since this started, several guidelines have come out. First, the ones very realistic, and slowly patients have been more and more involved in the writing of these guidelines. And today we have some very, very good guidelines. At JPND, we wrote our first version in 2015, which are still being used. They're very actual, but we are actually on the process now of updating with everything we have learned since. But next slide, please. We still did not have the answer to our questions. We had more questions. Were all the countries being involved in PPI? How are these countries being integrated and the cultural difference being taken into account? Did they learn from each other? The impact remained a question. How did they communicate? Did they share their experiences? So this was remaining despite the excellent guidelines that were being written. Next slide, please. So we did what we do. We asked the researchers to answer questionnaires. And we wrote a very nice questionnaire with several questions, which you can read here. And we send them to the PIs and expect them to reply along the project on year 1 and then at the end of the project. But since this was not a mandatory thing, and researchers are so overloaded with bureaucratic world and reporting that has to be done to be funded, we barely got any reply. So it was clear that researchers needed support on PPI, and they did not need more reporting along the project. Next slide, please. So this is when we really felt there was a need to go to the people who were doing it and learn from them. So we set ourselves to create a PPI network with the aim of it being multinational and multicultural, so involving people from all the countries at least that were involved in the consortium. For that, we had to develop a plan. We had to find the human and the financial resources to specifically allocate to this network, and we had to have it, of course, approved by the management board at JPND. We did it. We finally got it last year, and we have now a secretariat and a coordinator that manages all the activities of the network. And we have, of course, the most important, which is the externally recruited people with experience with PPI. And we expect it to represent people from all over the world, again, starting with the countries involved in the consortium, of course. We are at the very beginning. But the aim is really not to increase the workload of the researchers, but to improve and to learn about the outcome of the research by talking and listening to the view and experience of the people who live the disease and their carers who have participated in research. And they would share with us what they have learned, what has worked, what has not worked, what were the challenges. Next slide, please. So the criteria we used to recruit these people were mainly that they would have to be either citizens diagnosed or their carers. They could also be representatives for patients' organizations, national and umbrella patient organizations, some researchers with experience of PPI, and there are plenty now, and of course the people recruiting them. We wanted to hear how was their experience in the field. Until now, we have recruited around 10 people, patients, mainly patients and carers, but also some researchers. Most of them have a vast experience with PPI, and others are very eager to learn. We have people from Ireland, from the Netherlands, from Germany, Bulgaria, Portugal, Denmark. And we, after our last panel review meeting in Krakow, we had a commitment for people from underrepresented countries and minorities and different backgrounds to advisors, members that will join this network of people with experience and who are willing to share their experience with us. Next slide, please. Here, there's a snapshot of some of the people that make part of our network right now. So far, we've been extremely lucky, I have to say. These people have accepted to join. The gentleman here with the hat, it's Henk Lindenman from the Netherlands. He has actually participated both last year in a pilot trial and this year, and he attended the panel review meeting where he had a chance to expose his opinions about the projects he had reviewed and about his own experience as a patient and as a PPI reviewer and participator. But other members of the network have also participated in the review of projects this year with a very, very short notice. I have to tell you that this people worked under a lot of pressure. We were not expecting that for this year, but this went much beyond what we could expect. So what we really expect in general from the network is that, of course, they will continue sharing their experience with PPI in other settings, not only at JPND, because they work with very different settings, and that is how we learn. Of course, there will be a source of external experts to review our calls because we need to have external reviewers, and we think the best external reviewers are, in fact, patients and carers who have done it before, and I have seen that this year, they really are. On the other hand, we also want the network to participate in setting priorities for future research at JPND together with our scientific advisory board. We'll sit each year and decide what is the best topic and what is the best way to involve patients on the next year's call or calls. and there will be always some PPI representatives in these meetings. We also, of course, want to hear about new insights and new developments on PPI that we could incorporate at JPND and make it work in a broader and deeper level. And this is our wishful thinking, but I have to say some members of our network have already shown eagerness to do this, is to interact directly with our researchers and help them in implementing PPI, the ones who may need some assistance. This is something that needs to be set up. We still are deciding how, but I think we've made a lot of progress. I should say also that this year we are in the process of, for the first time, seeing how this review of projects, although very qualitative, because we believe PPI is a qualitative subject that should not be quantified, we can still, in a qualitative manner, have it have an impact on the final score of the project. And we are in a process of implementing that, which is a big, big step forward, because this will make at least researchers look at it in a more serious way. It can mean funded or not funded eventually. Of course, the weight will very much depend on the topic of the call, and we'll adapt that. There will not be a one-size-fits-all. Next slide, please. So we are really convinced that sharing and learning experience from multinational, multicultural, and multi-groups is the way to go if we really want to know the impact. We should share what we have learned, we should gain new insights from each other, and adapt our practice accordingly. Next slide, please. So the take-home message today is very simple. There's really not answers here. PPI is a learning process. We need to do it. We need to ask the one who have done it, how did they overcome it? We need to have a top-down approach, which is, we already saw, guidelines, publications, papers to learn from, but the bottom-up approach is absolutely crucial when you have a multinational and multicultural PPI network. Of course, we also have transversally and foster transversally a learning among PPI partners themselves. So, for instance, countries with more experience will learn in the same consortium from the ones with least, and this is something that we will incorporate on the criteria for the PPI plan at JPND. And thank you very much for your presence. And on behalf of JPND and the whole team, I thank you all for sitting here today, and we'll be very happy to answer some questions you may have in the chat. Thank you.